This exam, the professor sneered, holding it like trash, isn't even his handwriting. Kendrick froze, every eye locked on him, every whisper cutting deeper. He hadn't cheated. He hadn't even finished. But someone turned in a perfect test with his name on it, and the university was already building the noose. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. Kendrick Malone's pen danced like a violin bow over sheet music. Each number flowed into the next, not just solving equations, but conducting them, eloquent, precise, complete. It wasn't just math to him. It was rhythm. It was breath. Room 301 of Barringer Hall, the university's most prestigious lecture auditorium, was where he belonged. The ceilings stretched so high they echoed ambition. The marble boards behind Professor Elliot Crane reflected light like a cathedral's stained glass. And Kendrick, the only black student in the front 2 rows, sat at dead center where he always did. Professor Crane, tall, silver-haired, and aristocratically distant, moved like he owned the air. He was revered, not liked, no, never liked, but respected. Students whispered about his time at Oxford, his guest lectures at MIT, and the way he never missed an error. Crane didn't believe in leniency. He believed in hierarchy. Today's lecture was midterm preparation. Crane's famed mock examination day. Students lined the benches with sharpened pencils. 2 calculators, graphing and scientific, both mandatory, and caffeine-laced drinks hidden under their desks. Kendrick didn't need any of that. He had it in his head. Numbers were his second language. As the test began, silence fell like snowfall. Only the scratching of graphite filled the vast chamber. After 30 minutes, most students had barely reached question 6. Kendrick was already sketching the final matrix derivation for problem 12. His pencil looping confidently. His mind was a forest trail he'd already memorized. The logic fell into place like dominoes. And then, a shadow moved. A pause in the steps. Professor Crane's loafers stopped directly beside Kendrick's desk. "Kendrick Malone," Crane said coldly, his voice cutting the silence like broken glass. The room stilled. "Would you mind standing up?" The classroom's collective gaze pivoted. Whispers halted mid-breath. Kendrick, stunned, slowly stood. His height was barely above average, but in this moment, every inch felt like it was being measured in question. "Is this your paper?" Crane held up Kendrick's nearly complete worksheet between 2 fingers like it was contaminated. "Yes, sir," Kendrick replied, confused. His voice was calm but tight. Crane's lip curled. Not quite a smirk, not quite disgust. "Interesting," he said, "because this problem set was meant to test your ability to work through logical sequences in real time. No prior exposure, no guide. And yet somehow, your answers are nearly identical to the university's archival solution." Kendrick blinked. "What archival solution?" "Don't lie." Crane's voice turned sharper, but quiet enough to be dramatic. "You've clearly accessed restricted materials. These aren't your own derivations. They're memorized." The room gasped collectively. A girl in the 3rd row dropped her pencil. "I didn't cheat," Kendrick said, more to himself than to Crane. He couldn't comprehend what was happening. He looked down at his paper, his own handwriting, his own annotations. "I solved them. I can explain every step." Crane turned the paper around. "You even copied the same rounding error from a version last used in 2015. A version no one in this room should have seen." The room froze. Kendrick's throat dried. I've never seen that before. I don't even know how to access that." Crane leaned forward, close enough for Kendrick to smell the faded scent of expensive cologne. "Do you expect me to believe that a freshman who came from a district with a subpar math curriculum, if I recall your application correctly, somehow outpaced every other student here, solved 12 problems in under 40 minutes? There it was. Polished, polite, poisoned. It wasn't just an accusation of cheating. It was a gut punch dressed in credentials. A not-so-subtle message. You don't belong here, Kendrick. Not in this classroom. Not at this level." Kendrick's mind raced, but his body felt frozen. The other students stared, unsure whether to pity him or doubt him. A few of them, those who always resented how fast he answered in class, how often Crane's gaze reluctantly acknowledged his solutions, were smirking. Crane straightened. "Effective immediately. You are being removed from this session. Your score will be held under suspicion of academic dishonesty, and a formal misconduct report will be filed." Kendrick stepped forward. Please, sir. I swear I didn't. You may appeal the decision through appropriate channels. For now, gather your belongings. A full silence sank into the room. Kendrick's hands trembled as he zipped his bag. No one offered a word. Not the classmates he helped during office hours. Not the ones who borrowed his notes last week. The silence said it all. He walked slowly up the aisle, each step heavy. Not a single eye looked away. Even the clock on the wall seemed to be watching. As he reached the exit, Professor Crane added one final note. Cheating may get you attention, Mr. Malone, but it won't get you respect. Kendrick paused in the doorway, his back turned. He didn't speak. He didn't cry, but something shifted in his chest, an invisible thread snapping quietly. He stepped out. Behind him, the classroom erupted in whispers again. But as Kendrick disappeared down the hallway, he didn't go home. He didn't go to the dean. He turned sharply and headed toward the one place few students dared enter without invitation, the graduate archives room. He needed to see that 2015 exam for himself. Because if Crane was lying, or if someone had set him up, Kendrick needed proof. He needed to know who had the answers, before he even asked the questions. As Kendrick reached for the digital archive terminal, a red notification flashed across the screen. Access denied. Your account privileges have been suspended pending investigation. And standing silently behind him was someone watching. The echo of the archive room denial screen still burned in Kendrick's mind as he stepped into the hallway. The fluorescent lights above flickering like they too were debating whether to fully acknowledge him. He felt the presence behind him disappear when he turned around, leaving only the cold air trailing along his neck. Whoever had been watching him didn't stick around. He didn't have the mental space to process it, because the moment he unlocked his phone, the world had already reshaped itself around the accusation. Notifications poured in like an avalanche, vibration after vibration tapping against his palm. At first he thought it was normal. Group assignments, reminders, random memes. But as soon as he opened the first message, the truth hit harder than Crane's accusation. A friend from his calculus study group had messaged, "Hey man, what happened in Crane's class?" Another said, "Is it true? People are talking everywhere." A half dozen more followed, each one shorter, colder, more distant, as if everyone had silently agreed that Kendrick Malone, the student they once admired, was now radioactive. Even the ones who used to rely on him for notes suddenly acted like he was contagious. Then came the social media posts. Someone in the lecture hall had snapped a blurred photo of Crane holding up Kendrick's paper, and within an hour it spread across Instagram stories, with captions that stabbed deeper than any accusation Crane had delivered to his face. "Damn, even prodigies cheat now," another said. "Kendrick too smart to be real. Guess we know why." A popular student influencer reposted it with a single sentence that struck like a punch. "Kendrick got caught? They didn't even bother spelling his name right." Reddit threads multiplied faster than he could scroll. On Campus Watch, the university's unofficial gossip hive, a top thread titled "Freshman Genius Exposed" had 100 comments already dissecting every rumor, fabricating new ones, and stitching them into an entirely new identity for him. They didn't refer to him as Kendrick anymore. They called him that kid, the cheater, Crane's problem case. Someone wrote, "I heard he's been using solver programs for months. He always finishes first. Suspicious." Another said, "People from underperforming districts sometimes crack under pressure. No shame, but cheating ain't it." Someone else chimed in, "Cheaters don't change. Drop him." Lop chimed in, "Cheaters don't change. Drop him." What unsettled Kendrick most wasn't the lies. It was how quickly everyone believed them. He walked across the lawn toward his dorm, feeling the air shift as he passed groups of students who paused in mid-conversation, their eyes flickering to him before drifting away in faux politeness. The paved walkway felt narrower than usual, tightening like it was squeezing him into an uncomfortable silence. On the benches near the student union, two sophomores whispered loudly enough that he knew they wanted him to hear. One said, "He always looked too confident," while the other added, "These professors don't just accuse without reason." Their tone wasn't malicious. It was casual, careless, the way people discuss weather patterns, something distant, harmless, irrelevant, except he was the weather. And today they'd decided he was a storm. His phone buzzed again, this time from his roommate Austin. "Where you at?" The message read, flat and uncharacteristically short. Kendrick typed back, "Just left the archives, headed back." There was no reply. When Kendrick entered the dorm room, he immediately felt the atmosphere shift. Austin sat at his desk, headphones around his neck, Laptop open to a Reddit page. That Reddit page. He closed it when he saw Kendrick. A little too quickly, pretending he had been scrolling through something harmless. The awkwardness clung to the room like humidity. "You okay, man?" Austin asked, not meeting his eyes. "I don't know," Kendrick answered honestly, dropping his backpack onto his bed. "You saw the posts?" Austin hesitated before nodding. "Everyone's talking about it. They're saying Crane's filing the report tonight." "Of course he is." Kendrick ran his hand over his face. "I didn't cheat, Austin." "I believe you," Austin said. But something in his tone, a slight tremor or maybe a lack of conviction, made the words falter. It wasn't distrust exactly, but it also wasn't the solid confidence Kendrick needed. "You believe me," Kendrick repeated slowly. "But you're still reading the threads." Austin's silence answered more clearly than his words. He sighed, swiveling his chair away, trying to escape the discomfort. "Look, it's just, Crane is Crane. Nobody crosses him. If he's accusing you, people are gonna take his side. You gotta understand." "I understand exactly." Kendrick cut in, his voice low but steady. "People believe what they want to believe, especially when it comes to someone who looks like me." Austin didn't respond. He didn't need to. The truth hovered between them, unspoken but sharp. Kendrick couldn't sit still. He paced the room, staring at his phone as more notifications pinged. Someone on Instagram posted a poll. Did Kendrick cheat? Thousands of students voted within minutes. The majority leaned yes. He locked his phone, but the silence felt heavier. He moved to the window. Outside, the sun was setting over the campus, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch toward him like fingers. The sky looked beautiful in a distant, uncaring way. People walked in groups, laughing, living their lives while his was being rewritten without his consent. He didn't realize Austin was watching him until he spoke softly. "Maybe just lay low tonight." "Lay low?" Kendrick murmured. "My name is dissolving in real time and people want me to disappear quietly?" Austin didn't have an answer, so Kendrick grabbed his jacket and stepped out again, the door shutting behind him with a dull final sound. He needed air, real air, not the stale suffocating kind of the dorm. He walked the length of the quad, the lamps turning on one by one, as dusk took hold. He thought stepping outside would help, but everywhere he went he felt eyes grazing him. Near the science building, two juniors stopped their conversation as he passed. One whispered. He walked right into it, while the other replied, "Crane's too smart to get it wrong." A group of students sitting on the grass paused to watch him walk. One girl pointed subtly, whispering into her friend's ear. Their pity felt worse than accusation. Pity meant they already believed the lie. By the time he circled back toward the dorms, his chest felt tight, like the accusations were pressing into his ribs. He checked his phone again, unable to resist the impulse. Someone had tagged him in a comment. He always looked like he was trying too hard. Makes, another claimed. He didn't write his own application essays either. Heard he got help. Lies. All lies. But lies spread faster than truth, especially when the target didn't fit the image of who people thought should excel. He leaned against a lamppost, closing his eyes, grounding himself with a slow breath. He thought of his mother, who worked double shifts to get him here. He thought of his high school teacher, who told him he had a mind that didn't know how to quit. He thought of all the nights he had spent practicing, studying, pushing himself, and now all of it could crumble because one man decided to challenge his existence. Then his phone buzzed again. But this time it wasn't another insult, another rumor, another person doubting him. It was an unknown number. The message contained a single screenshot, nothing else. No greeting, no explanation. Kendrick's eyes narrowed as he opened it. It was a private group chat titled "Preserve the Curve." The profile icons were students he recognized, the elite ones. The legacy admits, those who always sat in the front row polishing their egos rather than their skills. At the top of the screenshot was a message that sent a chilling wave through his entire body. "If we don't stop Kendrick now, Crane won't curve. He ruins the distribution every time. Someone needs to push Crane to take action." Below it, "He's too good. This is our chance." And then another. "Crane listens to us. He'll believe it." The last message in the screenshot froze Kendrick where he stood. "Once he's out, this class is ours again." Before Kendrick could react, another message arrived from the same unknown number. "They're not done yet." A second screenshot popped up, this one showing the same elite group discussing how to manufacture patterns in Kendrick's work to frame him further. And the next message read, "Crane is already on board." Kendrick stared at the second screenshot. the group chat that confirmed everything he'd only begun to suspect. It wasn't just slander. It wasn't just a smear. This was coordinated, cold, and it had Professor Crane's silent approval. The same man who stood in front of students like a pillar of integrity had not only listened to these whispers, he had acted on them. But even more disturbing than what was said was who stayed silent. Kendrick knew this wasn't just about a false accusation anymore. This was about a culture of silence wrapped in prestige. Crane was the symbol of it, but he wasn't alone. He was protected, perhaps even celebrated, for keeping certain students in check. Kendrick realized that if he didn't expose the truth soon, the story that had been written for him would be carved in stone. He needed someone who'd been through this before, someone who survived it. He started by messaging a graduate student named Luis Garza, a quiet, highly regarded Hispanic researcher in the university's mathematics lab. Luis had been in Crane's upper division class 3 years ago, and had seemingly vanished from advanced theory courses afterward. Kendrick had heard whispers before, rumors of Luis being too sensitive, or burned out, but now those rumors felt like warnings disguised as gossip. It took 4 messages and a bold ask before Luis finally agreed to meet. They sat under the decaying old oak tree behind the engineering library, where privacy came easier and no one eavesdropped, unless they really wanted to. Luis wore a zip-up hoodie despite the sun, his eyes shifting constantly as if expecting Crane to appear at any moment. Kendrick didn't sugarcoat it. He explained what happened in the lecture hall, the screenshots, the accusations, the silence of the classmates who once praised him. As Kendrick spoke, Luis's expression didn't change, but his hand curled into a fist in his lap. "You're not the first," Luis finally said. "You won't be the last." Kendrick leaned forward. "So it's true. He targets minorities." Luis nodded once. "He doesn't come at you with slurs. He does it smarter than that. Quiet, systematic. First he questions your methods. Then he starts losing your assignments, takes points off without reason, calls your work creative instead of accurate. And if you push back, suddenly your emails go unanswered. Your grade tanks. No appeal sticks." Kendrick swallowed hard. "Why didn't you go public?" Luis looked at him sharply. "Because I was 1 semester away from losing my scholarship. And Crane? He's tenured. He runs this department. He writes recommendation letters that open or close entire futures." The words hung heavy. Kendrick could feel the weight in them. Something deeper than fear. It was generational exhaustion. Luis hadn't just been shut down. He'd been trained to survive by staying silent. "But someone else did fight back once," Luis said quietly, glancing over Kendrick's shoulder. "Asian student. Brilliant girl. Top of our cohort. What happened to her?" Luis sighed. "She's the reason I still passed." Kendrick blinked. "What does that mean?" Luis reached into his backpack and pulled out a slim plastic case. "You need to meet her. But before you do, you'll want to see this." Inside was a flash drive, unlabeled, scratched, but clearly important. Luis held it for a moment before handing it over. His hand lingered slightly too long, like he wasn't sure if giving it away would cause something to collapse inside him. "She gave this to me the day she dropped out," Luis said. "It's the only reason I got out of Crane's class with a passing grade, and the only reason I never spoke about him again." Kendrick stared at the flash drive in his hand. It felt too light for something that heavy. Luis's voice had softened, but his eyes, tired, sunken, still held the sharpness of a person forced into silence for too long. There was no need for drama. The weight in his words was enough. "She dropped out?" Kendrick asked, barely above a whisper. Luis nodded, pulling the zipper back over his hoodie, like he was sealing himself up again. "Her name was Naomi Liang. She was the best student in the class, held the best in the department. She didn't just understand math. She reshaped it. But Crane didn't like how visible she became. Or maybe it was the fact she never needed him." Luis paused for a long beat. Crane used to praise her in front of the class, but never sincerely. He'd say things like, "That's an interesting approach, Naomi. Not traditional, but I suppose that's expected." He always made it sound like she was guessing, like her intellect was lucky, instead of earned. Kendrick knew that tone. He'd heard it too, polished and poison-tipped, the kind of condescension you couldn't quote directly but felt down to the bone. He started docking her grades. Luis continued. Called her solutions overcomplicated, gave her a C- on an assignment that had fewer mistakes than mine, which got a B+, and when she asked for clarification, he told her to stop relying on novelty and stick to methods proven by real mathematicians. The phrase punched through Kendrick's chest. Real mathematicians. It wasn't just about math. It was about permission. About who got to be seen as legitimate in a world designed to exclude. Louise leaned back against the bark of the tree, exhaling. She compiled everything. Emails, grade logs, lecture recordings. She was going to take it to the department head, maybe even legal. Then she vanished. Dropped her major. Transferred out. And the flash drive? Kendrick asked. She gave it to me the day she packed up her dorm. Said, I'd need it someday. Even if I didn't realize it yet. Louise turned to Kendrick, more direct now. If you're going to fight this, you'll need more than feelings. You'll need patterns. Receipts. Data. That flash drive might have all of it. Kendrick's grip tightened around the case. How do I reach her? Louise shook his head slowly. I haven't heard from her since. But if she's still anywhere near this university, you'll know. People like Naomi leave ripples. Kendrick stood, heart pounding, not with fear but with the rush of momentum. For the first time since the accusation, he didn't feel powerless. He felt dangerous. Not because of vengeance, but because he finally had a thread to pull, and he was ready to unravel every inch of Crane's carefully managed math. But before he could thank Louise, the older student looked up and said something that chilled him to the core. Be careful, Kendrick. He doesn't just protect his reputation, he buries threats. The walk back to Kendrick's dorm was a blur of faces he no longer trusted, and buildings that no longer felt safe. The flash drive in his jacket pocket felt like it was burning through the fabric, not because of heat, but because of what it might expose. This wasn't just about his grade anymore. It was about revealing an entire framework of discrimination that had quietly wrecked futures while wearing a suit and tie. Once inside, he locked his door, drew the curtains, and plugged the flash drive into his laptop like it was a detonator. The folders loaded slowly. Inside were dozens of subfolders, named with terms like lecture audio, grading evidence, gaslight notes, and most chilling Crane private. He started with a video file titled Office Hours March. The recording was grainy, taken from Naomi's phone, clearly propped up to the side. She sat across from Crane in his office. Her voice was confident, but Kendrick could hear a fracture beneath it. She questioned a recent grade, politely, precisely, professionally. Crane's tone in response was ice disguised as guidance. Naomi, he said, your work is ambitious, no doubt, but ambition without structure is chaos. And in this field, we value clarity. Naomi replied calmly, my steps followed the prescribed method. I double-checked them. You said yourself during lecture that alternate approaches were valid if properly proven. Crane's smile didn't reach his eyes. Yes, but that's assuming the person taking those alternate routes fully understands the foundation. Let's not conflate enthusiasm with comprehension. It wasn't what he said. It was how he said it. The way he framed her intelligence as messy, her innovation as recklessness, her discipline as coincidence. The next video was worse. It was from a study session she'd recorded, showing Louise's and Naomi's papers side by side. Same problem. Nearly identical answers. Hers had comments in red pen, words like unclear, assumption, and needs refinement. Louise's had a simple thank you, well done. Even more disturbing, a document in the folder titled Grade Audit Comparison showed a list of students across 3 semesters, filtered by last names and what Kendrick now understood to be ethnic identifiers. A horrifying pattern emerged. Non-white students were overrepresented in the C and D grade columns, even when their performance on in-class assignments was consistently stronger. Another folder labeled Discussion Logs had screenshots of Naomi's posts being removed from the class forum for derailing academic discourse. Her questions were sharp but valid, challenging Crane's conclusions, asking about alternate theories. Posts from white students doing the same were met with engaged replies. But it wasn't until he opened a file titled cranerecommends.etf that Kendrick felt the floor shift under him. It was a list, an internal email Naomi had somehow obtained. Subject line recommended student fellows. 20. The names listed were all familiar. All white. All male. All handpicked by Crane to represent the department in national competitions and funding opportunities. Kendrick's own name wasn't there, despite being the top performer in his class for the past semester. At the bottom of the email, a chilling line from Crane to a department head. We must preserve the program's reputation. It thrives when we maintain its academic lineage. Academic lineage. A sanitized phrase. But Kendrick knew what it meant now. Just as the horror fully settled, his phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. No name, no greeting. Just a single line. You should stop before you end up like Naomi. His chest tightened. The air in the room seemed to freeze. He looked again at the flash drive, at the folders, the evidence, the truth, and now the threat. But the next message came in immediately after. Same number. Check your door. Kendrick stood slowly, every step toward the door suddenly feeling like a countdown. He looked through the peephole. No one was there. Cautiously, he opened. Lying on the floor was a manila envelope. No address. No name. Just a single word written across the front in black marker. Harper. Kendrick picked it up. Inside was a printed email thread between Professor Crane and a student newspaper editor, requesting they kill a story about Kendrick, in exchange for exclusive academic favors, and scribbled in handwriting at the bottom, "If you want help, find Harper Jennings. Tell her Naomi sent you." Kendrick didn't sleep that night. The envelope bearing Harper Jennings' name sat on his desk like an unopened verdict. He hadn't even met her yet, but her name now felt like a lifeline or a trap. Every hour he spent going through Naomi's files made it harder to breathe. The flash drive wasn't just digital evidence. It was a mirror held up to the institution's rotting heart. Just past 3:00 a.m., Kendrick opened a folder he hadn't touched yet. It was labeled Zoom recordings. Inside 6 video files. The timestamps ranged across 2 semesters, Naomi's and Luis's years. He clicked the first one. The screen flickered. Professor Crane appeared in a private office hours Zoom call. The student on the other end was a young black woman named Taylor Carter. Kendrick recognized her from a STEM Society meeting last fall. She had been vocal in forums but had recently gone quiet. In the video, she looked confident, poised. That wouldn't last. Taylor asked a clear question about Crane's feedback on her proof method. Crane leaned back in his chair, his voice slow, condescending. "Taylor, you're very passionate. But in mathematics, passion doesn't translate to clarity. What you submitted was more of a guess than a proof." Taylor responded calmly. "I followed the same multivariable approach you introduced last week. Just applied it to the alternate structure you mentioned." "Yes," Crane interrupted. "And you misapplied it. You took a shortcut I never taught and expected it to impress me." Her shoulders tensed on screen. "But it was correct. You said we could experiment with approach as long as—" Crane cut her off again. "Experimentation is a privilege of those who've mastered the fundamentals. You haven't reached that stage yet." Then, without warning, the call ended. He had removed her. Kendrick blinked, stunned. The cruelty hadn't been loud, but it had been exact, precise, sharpened like a scalpel. It was the kind of dissection that didn't leave bruises, only invisible scars. He clicked the second video. This one was of a student named Jamal Knight, another math major who had mysteriously dropped out 2 semesters ago. Jamal had asked about his midterm grade. The video showed Crane reviewing it. "I see here you got a 71, Crane said. "But upon reevaluation, I'm revising it to a 64. Your proof doesn't follow proper notation." Kendrick leaned in. He had seen Jamal's work before. Notation had never been a weakness. "You already graded it," Jamal said, holding up the original PDF. "You didn't mention notation before. I reserve the right to adjust when patterns emerge." Crane replied coldly. "Frankly, your tendency to copy structure without understanding is becoming predictable." "Are you saying I plagiarized?" Crane's smile flickered. "I'm saying you mimic. It's not uncommon." The implication rang loud and unmistakable. "You don't think for yourself." Jamal sat there silent, humiliated, and then thanked Crane before logging off. The next 3 recordings repeated the same formula. Calm voices from students of color, thoughtful questions, fair concerns, and then slow, steady erasure. Sometimes Crane altered their tone in feedback emails. Sometimes he changed scores without explanation. In one case, he told an Indian student with a mild accent, "It's difficult to decipher your spoken logic. I suggest sticking to written submissions." The words were surgically crafted, non-violent but violent in impact. Then Kendrick opened the final recording. It was different. A dual recording screen share and webcam. The student's face wasn't shown, but the voice was male, calm, sharp. Crane was mid-sentence. "I'm advising you as someone with influence in this department to reconsider the rhetoric you've used in your term paper." The student replied, "You mean the part where I quoted Naomi Lang's letter?" "I mean," Crane said, voice tightening, "that you should avoid referencing students whose departures were complicated." We don't want a pattern of paranoia disrupting current cohorts. There it was. Pattern. Paranoia. The way he pathologized dissent. Anyone who challenged him wasn't just incorrect. They were unstable. Kendrick sat back, heart hammering. The recordings weren't just evidence. They were living testimony of a man who built power through subtle sabotage. Always careful. Always polished. But devastating in precision. The kind of racism you couldn't easily quote or record in hallway conversations. But now here it was. Documented. Organized. Undeniable. And the most disturbing part. He never once raised his voice. Kendrick spent the next hour compiling clips, trimming them into one coherent 8-minute file. He added subtitles, bolded Crane's most egregious comments, and prepared a breakdown that matched students' names to course logs. This wasn't an accusation. It was a pattern. Cold. Repeatable. Documented. He logged into the university's academic misconduct portal, where students could submit appeals or challenge accusations. He uploaded the video compilation with attached time-stamped files, the internal grading inconsistencies, and a written testimony citing Naomi Liang's research and Luis's confirmation. He clicked submit. The page froze. Then, a red banner appeared at the top of the screen. Submission blocked. Your account has been restricted due to ongoing investigations. Kendrick blinked. He refreshed. Same message. He checked his university email. A new alert had landed just seconds earlier. Due to recent allegations and the ongoing academic misconduct review, your portal privileges have been temporarily suspended. Please contact the Office of Compliance for further details. No contact number. No appeal button. Just a cold wall of silence. He slammed the laptop shut. For a moment, everything in the room was still. The air felt electric, charged with helplessness and fury. They had locked him out, not just of systems, but of his right to defend himself. The university hadn't just chosen neutrality. It had chosen preservation. They were protecting Crane and burying him. Kendrick picked up the envelope again. Harper Jennings, the name scribbled in Naomi's desperate hand. He opened it fully this time, studying the email thread again. But Harper, whoever she was, had apparently resisted. The thread ended with a bold reply from her. I don't kill stories, especially not for men like him. Kendrick grabbed his jacket, rage sharpening his focus. If the portal wouldn't take the truth, someone else had to. And whoever Harper was, she had already seen behind the curtain. As Kendrick stepped into the hallway, his phone buzzed with a new message from the unknown number. Crane knows what you found. Don't go to the newsroom. They're watching. The message hit Kendrick harder than any rumor had. Crane knows what you found. Don't go to the newsroom. They're watching. Every part of him wanted to dismiss it, to chalk it up to paranoia, or just another anonymous student playing internet prophet. But by now, Kendrick understood one thing better than most. Silence doesn't mean safety. Silence is how they win. Still, the warning couldn't be ignored. He didn't go to the campus newsroom that morning. Instead, he redirected his steps toward the Office of Academic Integrity. Tucked inside an old administration building, no one paid attention to, unless they were in trouble. The hallway was unusually sterile. Clean carpet, neutral paintings and plaques of donors on the wall. A quiet museum of politeness and institutional indifference. The woman at the front desk greeted him without looking up. Name and student ID? Kendrick Malone, he said. I received an email about restricted access. I need to speak to someone. It's urgent. She clicked slowly through her screen.
Yes, your file's active.
Tribunal hearing is scheduled for Thursday 9 a.m. You've been placed under temporary academic probation. No one told me I was even being investigated yet, Kendrick replied. It was triggered when Professor Crane submitted the misconduct report. It's auto-routed. I submitted evidence, multiple recordings, proof of racial bias, and documentation that I was targeted. She gave a neutral nod, still not meeting his eyes. That's for the tribunal to assess. Kendrick's voice edged higher. And do I get legal support or student advocacy? I need representation. The woman finally looked at him. Expression blank. Our university doesn't assign student advocates unless the case involves legal criminal proceedings. This is internal, academic integrity. And Crane? Kendrick asked. Her silence said enough. She didn't have to confirm. Of course Crane would be allowed legal counsel. Of course he'd be protected by the very policies meant to keep students accountable. Kendrick left with a time, a room number and a burning knot in his chest. The tribunal took place in the chancellor's hearing room, Wood-paneled, grand and completely out of proportion for a disciplinary meeting. The board consisted of 3 tenured faculty members and 1 compliance officer. Kendrick sat alone on the left side of the long table. On the right, Professor Elliot Crane sat in a tailored gray suit, flanked by a university legal representative, who smiled like she already knew the outcome. The compliance officer opened with monotone efficiency. "Mr. Kendrick Malone, you've been summoned for a tribunal hearing under the Academic Misconduct Protocol, following allegations made by Professor Elliot Crane regarding your midterm exam performance on March 3rd. Crane didn't even look at Kendrick as the charges were read. He sat poised, calm, scribbling notes on a leather-bound pad like this was a formality, like he was rehearsing for something else. The performance was immaculate. Kendrick presented first. He spoke clearly, organizing the timeline of events. The public accusation, the restricted test version, the group chat screenshots showing a coordinated effort, and finally, Naomi's flash drive, the videos, the grade audits, the email. He referenced each by file name, offered printed copies of transcripts, and connected each to the broader racial disparity under Crane's grading pattern. He ended by saying, "This isn't just about one accusation, it's about a pattern, a system built to protect a professor who's been quietly harming students who don't fit the mold." One of the board members, a soft-spoken economist, interrupted. "Mr. Malone, while we acknowledge the emotional weight of your testimony, much of the material you've submitted is not permitted in official proceedings. Secret recordings, even of virtual meetings, violate privacy clauses of university policy." Another added, "And the chat logs you've provided, while troubling, are not verified through our internal server. They could be fabricated." "I didn't fabricate anything," Kendrick said firmly. "Intent isn't in question," the compliance officer responded. "It's admissibility that's the issue." Kendrick looked to the one woman on the board, hoping for a flicker of empathy, but she was scanning her notes, avoiding his eyes. Then Crane stood to speak. His tone was warm, almost paternal. "It is always disheartening when a student faces such immense pressure that they resort to dishonesty. I never wanted this to become punitive, but I have a responsibility to uphold academic standards. Mr. Malone has potential, but this institution must remain rooted in integrity. Without it, our achievements mean nothing." He paused for effect. "I didn't come here today to punish. I came here to preserve." Kendrick could have laughed if the moment weren't so tragic. The man who had orchestrated silent ruin for students like him now stood as the face of dignity, and no one in that room challenged it. He tried once more. "Why won't any of you acknowledge the pattern? I've shown it on video, in grades, in emails. This isn't about one test." A faculty member responded, "Even if a pattern exists, that would be a matter for a separate grievance review. Today's hearing is focused solely on your exam." "So I'm supposed to fight a system while it's burying me?" Kendrick asked. "And wait in line to prove what you already refused to see?" No one answered. The room fell quiet. The kind of quiet that always favors the one who already has the microphone. After a short recess, the board returned. The compliance officer stood. "Effective immediately, Kendrick Malone will be placed on academic probation, pending final resolution. You are required to cease attending Professor Crane's lectures, and your exam score will be suspended from GPA consideration. Your appeal rights remain, but until further review, this status is active." Kendrick didn't flinch, he didn't plead, he didn't break. He just stood and walked out. Outside the chamber, the hallway felt cavernous. The university banners that hung overhead now looked like curtains covering a performance no one wanted to end. A few undergraduates passed him. One recognized him, whispered something to a friend, and kept walking. He was no longer just a student. He was now a symbol, and the institution was making sure that symbol was a warning. He stepped out into the cold air. The wind had picked up. It sliced across his face, sharp and real, unlike the practiced smiles and polished cruelty he'd just left behind. His phone buzzed. It was a text, unknown number. Again. But this time, the message wasn't a threat. It was a video link. No caption, no context. Kendrick opened it, and his breath caught. It was footage of Crane in a private faculty Zoom meeting, recorded months earlier. Crane was speaking freely, assuming confidentiality. The voice was unmistakable. And the words, "I don't want another Naomi situation." That girl turned every critique into a civil rights cause. "If this Kendrick kid keeps pushing, we'll have another media fiasco on our hands. He's a risk. Shut it down before it spreads. The screen went black. Attached to the video was a single line. You're not alone. Meet me behind the old library tonight. Midnight. Don't bring your phone. Midnight behind the old library felt like walking into a forgotten chapter of campus history. The building stood like a relic, stone columns eroded by time, ivy choking its edges, the windows reflecting nothing but darkness. Kendrick left his phone in his room, as instructed, trusting an unknown source he had no reason to believe. Except for one, the video was real. Crane's voice, unfiltered and unguarded, had called him a threat, not a student, not a human being, a risk to be contained. He waited under the archway, every second tightening his chest. Then a figure emerged from the shadows, moving quickly but without fear. A hoodie concealed the face, until the person stopped in front of him, and pulled it down. "Harper Jennings," she said. "I was wondering how long it would take before they gave you the envelope." Kendrick blinked. "You are the journalist who wouldn't play nice." "Yeah. That's me." Harper wasn't what Kendrick expected. Not in looks, short, with sharp brown eyes, and blunt cut hair. Not in demeanor, either. She wasn't overly warm or performative. She spoke with urgency, but without panic. "I've been following Crane for over a year," she continued. "But it was Naomi who brought me in. She gave me everything. Documents, patterns, grade audits. But the student paper refused to publish it. Said it was too risky without official backing." "So you went rogue?" Kendrick asked. "I created a private server. I've been collecting testimonies, data, leaked faculty memos. I've got enough to start a fire that reaches the Board of Regents." Kendrick hesitated. "Why didn't you release it before?" "Because Naomi disappeared," Harper said, and Louise went silent. "I thought if I published it then, they'd spin it as paranoia. But now, with you there's a name, a face, a story that's already bleeding into public view." She pulled a USB from her coat pocket. "This is yours now. But I'm publishing. In the morning. No more waiting." The next day, Kendrick woke to a campus and an internet he didn't recognize. The article hit the student network at 8:14 a.m. The headline, "Elite Professor Silences Black Student. Is this what genius looks like?" It was bold, confrontational, dangerous. Harper's writing was sharp, surgical in its pacing. She laid out Kendrick's GPA, his entrance scholarship, his class performance, and then methodically, she dismantled the accusation. She detailed the rigged exam, the isolated version, the sudden accusation mid-lecture. But she didn't stop there. She referenced the group chat messages, the video footage, Naomi's disappearance, Luis's silence, and Crane's voice, recorded in that off-the-record Zoom, calling Kendrick a writ. By noon, the article had been shared over 100,000 times. On Twitter, the hashtag #NetKendrickSpeak began trending. First locally, then nationally. Students from other schools reposted it. Professors at rival universities shared it with quiet commentary. Influencers, some who had never once spoken about education, let alone racism, jumped on the story. Some made TikToks reenacting the accusation scene, based on the article. Others broke down the statistical data Harper had embedded, including a damning chart comparing grade distributions by race in Crane's past courses. And then came the emails. Kendrick's inbox flooded with subject lines like, "We believe you. Thank you for speaking up, and this happened to me too." Some were anonymous. Others were from students he'd never met. Black, brown, first generation who all shared similar stories. Not all involved Crane. Some spoke of other professors, other departments. But the root was the same. The story hadn't just exposed one man. It had exposed a culture. The university, caught completely off guard, issued a short, painfully neutral statement by mid-afternoon. "We are aware of the article regarding Professor Elliot Crane and a student's academic appeal. The university is committed to fairness and integrity and is reviewing the matter internally." It was empty, corporate, designed to appear responsive while saying nothing. But by then, the public pressure was beyond containment. News outlets picked it up. Harper's article was reprinted on multiple student platforms, then featured on Medium, and later quoted by the Chronicle of Higher Education. A CNN anchor mentioned the hashtag during a segment on racial disparities in academia. Kendrick walked through campus and felt the shift. Some students nodded in support. A few offered hesitant smiles. Others looked away, ashamed or stunned. And yet, despite the sudden attention, the support, and the validation, Kendrick didn't feel relief. He felt something colder, deeper, He felt watched. His email was still locked. His student portal still blocked. Crane hadn't responded publicly, but his silence was strategic. He didn't need to defend himself yet. The university's machinery was still grinding in his favor. That night, Kendrick returned to his dorm, hoping naively that maybe things had begun to shift. He pushed open the door and stopped. The word cheater was spray-painted across his wall, in thick black strokes. It covered his bookshelf, bleeding onto his mattress, staining everything in its path. His desk had been overturned, his notes scattered, torn. The framed photo of his mother on his nightstand had been shattered. The glass still glistened in the carpet. And taped to the inside of his door was a single sheet of paper with cut-out letters from a magazine. Truth doesn't erase dishonor. For a moment, Kendrick didn't move, didn't breathe. The earlier noise, the interviews, the hashtags, the smiles on campus, all of it evaporated in the face of this brutal message. This was retaliation. Not from Crane. Not directly. This was from someone who still needed him to be the villain. Someone who couldn't stand the idea that the system they thrived in might be cracked open. He stepped carefully around the broken glass, picked up the photo of his mother, and sat on the edge of the ruined bed. The silence screamed louder than any insult ever could. His phone buzzed again. Another anonymous message. This ends when you stop pretending you belong here. Kendrick looked up and noticed a small security camera's reflection glinting from the ceiling corner. But the dorm didn't have cameras. Someone installed one. And someone had been watching. The whole time. Kendrick stared at the photo of Naomi for hours after finding it in his mailbox. Unable to shake the feeling that the game had changed again. But this time without rules. The image was too clean to be casual. Too deliberate to be random. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a rescue. It was something worse. A message. Naomi wasn't gone. Someone had eyes on her. And now they had sent those eyes Kendrick's way. In a world full of professors who smiled with polished cruelty, and students who whispered in group chats, while smiling to your face, Kendrick finally understood the real danger wasn't being accused. It was being watched. Back in the dorm, he sat on the edge of his stripped-down mattress, his breath slow and hollow, the memory of the word cheater still lingering on the walls like smoke. The janitorial staff hadn't touched it. His RA hadn't stopped by. Even the broken photo of his mother remained shattered beneath the desk lamp. Everything around him screamed isolation. But Kendrick wasn't surprised anymore. Silence wasn't an accident on this campus. It was a policy. People didn't want to be complicit. They wanted to be safe. That distinction was thin and dangerous. For days, the reactions around campus twisted into something uglier. At first, students had looked at him with sympathy, even curiosity. But after the vandalism leaked online, the tone shifted. A wave of posts circulated, claiming Kendrick staged the attack. Guilt play, some called it. Others reposted the image of his dorm wall with captions like, "Maybe the truth hurts." A meme page edited his face onto a courtroom stock photo with the phrase, "Student of the Year, Fraud of the Century." He walked past former classmates who turned their shoulders when they saw him. Study group partners from last semester crossed the quad like he was contagious. No confrontation. No loud denial. Just a quiet, practiced betrayal. The kind that slips into your bloodstream and makes you question your own memories. But the silence wasn't universal. It was Austin, his roommate, who finally broke. He walked into the dorm late one night, backpack still slung over one shoulder, and stood at the door as Kendrick sat quietly at his desk. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The room smelled faintly of printer ink and cold coffee. Then Austin dropped his bag and exhaled. "I messed up," he said, voice low, words brittle. Kendrick didn't turn around. "Yeah, you did." "I need to explain," Austin said. "Or at least admit it." Now Kendrick turned to face him, and Austin flinched, not from anger, but from the weight of his own cowardice. "A week ago," Austin began, "I got an email from one of the admin assistants, said they were collecting statements, said I could help clarify the environment in the dorm. Confirm some things about your behavior." Kendrick narrowed his eyes. "What kind of things?" "They didn't say lie. They didn't have to. They asked if you'd ever bragged about solving exams too easily. If you mentioned anything about faculty folders. I didn't say you did, but I didn't say you didn't. I just told them I didn't recall anything." "You didn't protect me," Kendrick said flatly. Austin nodded. "I protected myself." That silence returned. This time it came with understanding, but not forgiveness. But then I saw your door, Austin continued, his voice cracking. I saw what they did to your room. The glass, the camera, the way the school didn't even acknowledge it. And I realized, whatever fear I had, it's nothing compared to what they're doing to you. Kendrick's jaw clenched. And now you want to fix it. I want to be honest, Austin said. I want to do something right before this ends. Kendrick looked away, not from spite, but from exhaustion. Then say it out loud. Say I never cheated. He never cheated, Austin said without hesitation. It wasn't a full repair, but it was a crack in the wall. Later that night, someone unexpected reached out. Mallory Finch, the quiet white girl who sat 3 rows behind Kendrick in Crane's class. She DM'd him, a simple message. We're not all blind. I believe you. Then, without waiting for a response, she launched a petition titled, Demand a Fair Tribunal for Kendrick Malone. Her caption read, This is bigger than one exam. It's about the kind of university we want to be part of. The petition exploded. In less than 12 hours, over 15,000 students and alumni signed. Mallory added video commentary, calmly breaking down the inconsistencies in Kendrick's accusation. She referenced Naomi's case, Luis's statements, and Crane's refusal to engage publicly. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She just used facts and conviction. The backlash came fast. Mallory's social accounts were flooded with hate. An anonymous Reddit thread labeled her a white savior looking for clout. Someone edited her college ID photo with the caption, Karen 2.0. Her dorm door was vandalized 3 nights later with a note that read, Protect your own, stay silent. Kendrick saw it happen. Mallory showed up at his room the next morning. Shaking, she handed him the note and whispered, I didn't think it'd come to this. I thought if we were honest they'd listen. Kendrick took the note and looked her in the eye. That's exactly what they don't want. They? Mallory asked. Is it Crane? Kendrick shook his head. It's the system that protects Crane, that pretends to be neutral, that stays silent when we bleed. Her eyes welled, but she didn't cry. She clenched her fists and said, Then let's make them scream. That same afternoon, an envelope slid under Kendrick's dorm door. No markings, no name, just another photo. But this one wasn't of him. It was Naomi Liang, alive, sitting alone at a bus stop under gray skies. The timestamp was recent, just weeks ago. The surveillance angle made Kendrick's stomach twist. It was clean, too clean, not a random sighting, not a chance encounter. Someone had found her, and now someone wanted Kendrick to know. Was it a warning, a taunt, a breadcrumb? He turned the photo over. Nothing written, no clues, just one undeniable truth. Naomi never left. And if she was still nearby, it meant the story wasn't finished. It was just beginning again. Kendrick stared at the photo for a long time before realizing what was tucked behind it. A folded slip of paper, almost invisible, pressed between the layers. He unfolded it slowly, heart thudding. In delicate handwriting, barely legible, were 4 words. Don't trust the chair. The photo of Naomi didn't leave Kendrick's hand for hours. Even after he tucked it into his backpack, the image stayed etched behind his eyelids. The haunted posture, the guarded glance over her shoulder, the timestamp daring him to ask the next question. Whoever sent it wasn't trying to scare him, they were daring him to act. He was being given breadcrumbs, but every crumb came laced with risk. By nightfall, the air on campus had thickened into something heavier than autumn chill. Mallory met Kendrick behind the math building, both their faces drawn from the weight of the day's threats. She hadn't slept either. The note left on her door had gone unreported. She didn't trust the university to protect her, but fear had sharpened her resolve, not shattered it. We need something they can't dismiss, she whispered. Something beyond testimonies or rumors, or what Crane said on camera. Kendrick nodded slowly. We need proof of the setup. Mallory glanced around before continuing. I overheard something during TA office hours yesterday. Crane was ranting quietly, but clearly pissed. He said something about control group distributions being off again. Then he told the TA to double-check the alternate folder. Kendrick's brow furrowed. Alternate folder? She looked him in the eye. I think there's a second set of exams, meant for certain students. Students like you. Kendrick's breath caught. Mallory stepped closer. If I can get into that session, maybe I can find it. I'll go in as if I'm dropping off my homework. You wait outside. If I'm not back in 15 minutes, I'll come in. Kendrick finished. No, she said, eyes flashing. If I'm not back in 15 minutes, you leave. If they catch you near anything, they'll claim you tampered with it. Let me take the risk this time. Kendrick hesitated, then nodded. The TA lab was nestled 2 floors below the main lecture hall, buried in the maze-like underbelly of Barringer Hall. Mallory walked in like she belonged, clutching a worn-out folder of problem sets. The TA, Grant, barely looked up. He was too buried in screen tabs and textbook PDFs to care who entered. Mallory made small talk, bought herself a few minutes, then claimed she'd forgotten to submit a digital version of her assignment, and asked if she could email it from the terminal beside him. He waved her off. Yeah, just log in and send it. I'm busy cleaning the archive folders anyway. Perfect. Mallory navigated through the system, careful not to look like she was searching. But when she scrolled past the folder directory, her heart stuttered. There it was. ILT exams. Control group. The folder was locked behind a campus credential wall, but the terminal had admin access already logged in. With trembling fingers, she opened it. Inside were multiple subfolders labeled by semester F21 ALT, S22 ALT, F22 ALT. She clicked on F22 ALT. This semester, 10 files loaded. Each was a full exam. But what made her stomach twist wasn't the content, it was the naming system. Each file was titled with student initials. The file marked KMALT, midterm body ADEC, sat directly between 2 others. She clicked it open. Her eyes scanned the pages. The structure was entirely different than the one she remembered taking just days ago. This version was longer, more convoluted. The layout was unfamiliar. No diagrams, no hint boxes, questions that required leaps of logic instead of process. The instructions were coldly phrased, almost vague by design. And at the top corner of every page something stood out. Prepared by E. Crane. This wasn't a test from the department. It was hand-built, custom, targeted. She snapped photos quickly, praying the sound wouldn't alert Grant. She moved to other files, comparing them. A KMALTOT version was the only one with these specific formatting changes. Every other student had been given more accessible wording, scaffolded equations, multiple choice buffers. Kendrick's test was built to confuse, to exhaust, to break. Then she saw it. At the bottom of the metadata panel, note, use this one for him. Her fingers stopped mid-click. She stared, unblinking. She double-checked. The note wasn't embedded in the PDF body. It was written into the file's internal metadata. A private flag, invisible, unless specifically searched for. Someone wanted to make sure Kendrick got this version. She took the last photo, shut the windows, and exited the terminal calmly. Mallory burst through the doors 20 minutes later, flushed, breathless. Kendrick was pacing outside, fist clenched. I got it, she said, holding up her phone. Kendrick, you were right. It's real. He grabbed the phone, scrolling through the images. Every detail hit like a nail through the chest. The structural differences, the phrasing, the metadata, and most of all, that note. Use this one for him. It wasn't even vague. It was an instruction, a targeted hit, a direct decision to isolate, sabotage, and erase. Not by coincidence, by design. This is a smoking gun, he whispered. They can't ignore this. Mallory looked at him, her voice low but steady. Then we go public again. You bring this to Harper. You bring it to every media outlet that will listen. But what if they try to bury it again? Then we make sure it spreads before they can. They walked back together in silence, the weight of what they had found settling into their spines. This wasn't a theory anymore. It was orchestrated academic racism, with receipts, fingerprints, and a faculty name on the title page. Back at Kendrick's room, the spray-painted wall remained untouched. Maintenance hadn't come, no surprise. But now, that word, cheater, felt different. It wasn't shame anymore. It was evidence. Proof of who they feared. Mallory uploaded the files to an encrypted drive. Kendrick sent copies to Harper with a single subject line, now we bury him. But just as he hit send, a new email pinged in from the university system. Subject U Argent, academic data breach notification. The body read, a recent unauthorized access to private faculty materials has triggered a campus-wide investigation. All student files will be audited. Anyone found possessing confidential academic content will be subject to immediate disciplinary action, including suspension or legal referral. They were already trying to flip the story, make Kendrick the thief, make Mallory the hacker, make the truth look like a violation. But Kendrick had seen enough manipulation to recognize one thing now. They were scared. As Kendrick leaned back from his laptop, a new notification buzzed. A private message from Harper, sent just seconds ago. One sentence. The faculty chair just resigned and left behind a folder with your name on it. The message behind the Naomi photo echoed like thunder in Kendrick's mind. Don't trust the chair. He hadn't said anything to Mallory about it. Not yet. Not until he figured out what it meant. But the moment he read those words, something clicked. It had never just been about Crane. It had never only been a rogue professor with bias hidden behind eloquence. No, the rot was deeper, seated higher. And now, the world was watching. By the end of the week, protests erupted across campus. What started with a few students handing out flyers exploded into full-scale demonstrations. The student quad transformed into a rally ground, where handmade signs read, "Bias isn't brilliance. Let Kendrick speak. And how many voices did you silence, Crane?" Chants filled the open lawns, their echoes bouncing off brick buildings that had stood quiet for too long. Student organizations from every corner of campus joined in. Black Student Union, First Gen Collective, Women in STEM, even the Debate Society. They linked arms in the center of campus and refused to move. One speaker stood on a cafeteria bench with a megaphone and shouted, "Kendrick is not an outlier. He's evidence." The crowd roared back. Parents began calling the university. Donors began asking questions. And for the first time, the administration stopped ignoring Kendrick's name. The morning of the 7th protest, an official university statement landed in every student's inbox. It was the kind of press release that sounded calm, but screamed panic between the lines. In light of recent concerns regarding faculty-student conduct, Professor Elliot Crane has been placed on temporary administrative leave pending an internal review. The university reaffirms its commitment to fairness, inclusion, and academic integrity. But no mention of Kendrick. No acknowledgement of the exam manipulation. No reference to Naomi. Just a vague admission that something might have gone wrong. Someday, somehow, maybe. It wasn't accountability. It was survival. Kendrick sat on the steps of the Student Union building, watching a CNN Live segment on a classmate's laptop. The headline read, "Rising Black Scholar, Accused by Elite Professor. Now the country is watching." A news anchor summarized the events. Kendrick's record, Crane's accusations, the leaked metadata, the viral article, the targeted vandalism. Then, to Kendrick's surprise, the clip cut to him. It was footage from a campus interview taken just hours earlier. In the clip, Kendrick stood before the camera, exhaustion behind his eyes but certainty in his voice. "I didn't come here to fight the university," he had said. "I came here to learn. But the more I spoke up, the more the university fought me. If you think this is just about one professor and one exam, you haven't been paying attention." The anchor nodded solemnly. A story that started in one lecture hall is now igniting conversations nationwide. Mallory sat beside him, legs crossed, her hands fidgeting around her phone. "It's working," she whispered. "They can't control the story anymore." But Kendrick didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the email notification that had just appeared at the corner of his screen. It wasn't from a friend. It wasn't from the university. It was from truthbomb43, @darkmail.com. Subject line: "You're not the only one." His pulse quickened. He opened the message, careful not to make a sound. Inside was a single paragraph. "You think Crane was alone? Ask the registrar about Professor Harmon in 2019. Ask the Title IX office about Dean Wexler's recommendation policy. They buried my file too. But I kept records. Let's blow this wide open." Attached was a redacted file titled Pattern Proof Archived. Kendrick read it 3 times. He didn't recognize the sender's name. It wasn't signed. But everything inside felt real. Not dramatic, not exaggerated. Just methodical, devastating, factual. It detailed another case, another student, female, Black, dismissed after accusing a faculty member of reassigning her to less challenging curriculum tracks. Without consent. The email trail in the attachment showed Crane CC'd on some of those communications. And just like that, Kendrick saw the outline of something bigger. This wasn't just racism hidden behind grading systems. It was structural, strategic, and coordinated. Later that evening, Mallory's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and froze. Harper just published again. Kendrick leaned over her shoulder as she opened the link. The headline made his heart skip. "More than Kendrick. A system of silence at Behringer exposed." Harper had gone deep, digging through years of campus complaints, faculty records, and whistleblower files. The piece connected Kendrick's case to at least 4 others across 3 departments. Anonymous testimonies spoke of grading disparities, manipulated mentorships, rigged honor societies, and faculty coalitions that protected each other like a gated fraternity. She ended the article with one haunting quote.
They don't erase your record. They erase you.
By the next morning, the university's official social media accounts were flooded with comments, reposts, and demands for transparency. Alumni began retracting donations. A prominent civil rights attorney publicly tweeted, "Watching the Kendrick Malone case unfold at Behringer. We've seen this before. We know how it ends. Unless we stop it." And yet, even with the national attention, even with the mounting public outcry, Kendrick still hadn't been reinstated. His academic status remained under investigation. His GPA sat frozen. His future stalled on pause. "Why aren't they reversing it?" Mallory asked one evening. "They have to see this is unsustainable. They're hoping we'll run out of steam," Kendrick replied, "or that something new will replace us in the headlines." "But you're in the headlines," she pushed. "You're the headline." Kendrick looked at her, eyes heavier than his voice. "They're not scared of the headline, Mallory. They're scared of what happens when people like us learn how to write our own." Then came the unexpected. The faculty chair of the mathematics department, Dr. Bryce Sutter, announced his resignation via a cryptic university-wide memo. It read more like a personal apology than a formal departure. "I regret my silence. I regret what I allowed to fester behind my policies and under my watch. I am no longer the right person to lead this department." It was shocking. Sutter had always been Crane's quiet supporter, distant but powerful. His exit wasn't just a shakeup. It was a crack in the institution. That same evening, a student worker in the admin building slid an unmarked folder under Kendrick's dorm door. Inside was a printout, a chain of internal emails between Sutter and Crane, dates, notes, direct mentions of Kendrick's name, before the midterm ever happened. And at the bottom, one final sentence written in Sutter's own words. "If we let Kendrick rise, others will follow." Kendrick was still processing the sentence when his phone buzzed again. A second email from truthbomb43 at darkmail.com, no subject line this time. Just 3 words. "Naomi's still here." Kendrick opened the second email from truthbomb43 at darkmail.com, with a sense of foreboding already coiled in his chest. "Naomi's still here." That 3-word message was all it contained. No attachments, no context. But he knew better than to dismiss it. Everything in his life lately had come wrapped in silence. But that silence always broke open with something dangerous underneath. A minute later, another email landed. This time, there was an attachment, a tied XLX spreadsheet, titled simply Crane Grades Distribution 2015-2023. Kendrick's heart rate surged. He downloaded it and opened the file. Rows and rows of numbers filled the screen, names redacted, only initials visible, but next to each one were columns labeled ethnicity, gender, legacy status, midterm grade, final grade, course participation, bonus curve, final GPA contribution. It was meticulous, cold, clean, and deeply incriminating. The numbers spoke without needing adjectives. Black students on average scored 27% lower than white students, even when accounting for attendance and assignment completion. Latinx students fared only slightly better. Asian students were disproportionately penalized in subjective participation scores. White students who had legacy status, the children or relatives of alumni, received bonus curve points on over 85% of their exams. Those bonus curves were never listed in the syllabus. Kendrick scrolled faster, disbelief sinking into fury. This wasn't theory, it wasn't a gut feeling. It was a documented pattern of academic suppression, conducted over nearly a decade, buried behind the prestige of Crane's lectures, and protected by the inertia of tenure. He clicked into one tab labeled Annotations, and his blood ran cold. Comments like, adjust score to preserve distribution curve, non-legacy. Student from underperforming district, unlikely to handle upper-level coursework. Participant in minority grant program. Monitor closely. Monitor closely. They weren't just grading him, they were profiling him, preparing for his failure, managing his limits before he even stepped into the classroom. Kendrick forwarded the spreadsheet to Harper without a second thought. The subject line, "This ends today." Harper's response was near instant. "Meet me in 45 mins. Old student press office, 3rd floor. Bring your laptop. This one's going wide. The old student press office hadn't been used in years. It still smelled like dust and ink. Harper sat at the center table. Laptop open, 3 monitors surrounding her. She looked different. Less like a student journalist now, more like a war reporter embedded deep inside the front lines of a crumbling institution. I ran the data through my verification tools. She said without preamble. It's real. The timestamps align. The formulas match the university's archived metrics from old handbooks. This is institutionalized racial bias, dressed up as academic rigor. She turned one monitor toward Kendrick. A color-coded chart spread across the screen. Blue bars for white students, yellow for legacy, red for black students. The disparity was blinding. Even the year you entered, Harper said, pointing to a dip in the red bar. They started applying a sharper curve for white legacy students, likely to offset your scores. Kendrick's voice came out hoarse. So they didn't just target me. No, Harper said. They prepared for you. She didn't need to ask if she should publish it. She was already formatting the draft. Kendrick paced as she worked, his thoughts racing. Every word he had ever second-guessed. Every microaggression. Every time Crane had tilted his head and said, "Interesting approach." With that subtle tone of dismissal, it all made sense now. And then the room darkened, as Harper's screen went black for a second. Her email pinged. She opened it and frowned. Then her face shifted, calm replaced by something sharper. "It's from the university's legal team," she said quietly. Kendrick stepped closer. "What does it say?" Harper read aloud. "Dear Ms. Jennings, you are hereby issued a formal cease and desist order regarding the unauthorized possession and intended publication of private academic records derived from confidential university databases. Failure to comply will result in legal action and expulsion from all university-affiliated institutions." She leaned back, laughing bitterly. They didn't even bother using euphemisms this time. Kendrick stared at the screen, jaw tight. "They're trying to shut you down. Even now, they're scared," Harper replied. "We just gave them their own data in a language the world can't ignore." "What do we do?" Harper closed her laptop slowly. "We go bigger." That night, Harper uploaded the data anonymously to a public whistleblower archive. But she didn't just dump it. She embedded it in a visual investigative piece called "Designed to Fail: How One Professor Engineered Racial Inequity for Nearly a Decade." The article featured everything: the spreadsheet, the emails, the bonus curves, Crane's pattern of dismissing minority achievement while rewarding mediocrity cloaked in legacy. She cited Naomi, Louise, Kendrick, even pulled quotes from student evaluations buried deep in Rate My Professors. Calm patterns of coded language appearing again and again: cold, intimidating, unapproachable, plays favorites. The story exploded overnight. Major outlets picked it up. Academic forums dissected it. Legal advocacy groups started petitioning for a Title VI investigation. A Harvard professor tweeted, "This is not isolated. Behringer is a symptom, not the disease." Students across the country posted their own experiences with racist grading systems. The phrase "Crane curve" began trending as a mockery. But just as Kendrick felt a shift toward victory, Mallory called. Her voice was shaking. "Harper's in lockdown." Campus security showed up at her dorm with a letter. "They're trying to force her to sign a confidentiality agreement." Kendrick's grip tightened on the phone. "She won't sign it. She's resisting," Mallory said. "But they're using fear now. They're saying she accessed data illegally, that she could be prosecuted." Kendrick didn't hesitate. "Meet me at the admin building. We're not letting her go through this alone." As he hung up, another email buzzed into his inbox. It was a simple reply from truthbomb43 at darkmail.com. No greeting, no sign-off. The spreadsheet was just the start. Naomi has the rest. Attached was a grainy video file, time-stamped 6 days ago, showing Naomi, face partially obscured by shadows, stepping into the basement of a shuttered campus building. And in her hand, a flash drive, glowing red. The sun rose behind thick gray clouds, the morning of Kendrick Malone's second hearing, casting long shadows across Behringer Hall, like the building itself was bracing for exposure. For the first time in university history, an academic misconduct hearing would be streamed live to students, faculty, and alumni. It wasn't a concession. It was pressure. National news cameras were already parked outside the administration building, wires coiled like veins across the sidewalk. Protest signs surrounded the lawn. Some read, "Justice for Kendrick." Others simply bore one word in bold font, uncurved. Kendrick stood at the edge of the crowd, dressed in a dark navy suit borrowed from his uncle. His mother had driven 6 hours to attend, but was kept outside due to capacity limits. She sat in the third row of protesters, clutching her Bible and whispering beneath her breath. Beside Kendrick stood his attorney, Jordan Wells, a young, sharp black civil rights lawyer, known for pushing back against institutional gaslighting. On Kendrick's other side, Mallory waited with a flash drive in hand. Behind them, Harper clutched a thick folder of transcripts, screenshots and printouts of Crane's grade history. They weren't walking into a hearing. They were walking into a reckoning. The tribunal room had been converted into a high-resolution broadcast chamber. Microphones were clipped to every speaker's collar. Cameras lined the corners. Screens were set up in overflow rooms to accommodate the thousands watching across campus and online. The faculty board remained, 3 senior professors and 1 external compliance officer, but this time their names were public, their expressions nervous. Professor Elliot Crane entered last, flanked by a university legal advisor in a gray pinstripe suit. Crane wore a perfectly pressed jacket, calm as ever, chin lifted like the room still belonged to him. But his eyes flickered, just slightly, when he saw Harper and Mallory seated up front. He hadn't expected this much resistance. The hearing opened with formalities. Names, charges, a statement of transparency. The compliance officer cleared his throat and gestured to Kendrick. "Mr. Malone, you may begin." Jordan stood. His tone was sharp, but steady. "We contend that not only was Kendrick Malone falsely accused of academic misconduct, but that the very accusation was a product of racially motivated targeting, sanctioned by Professor Crane and reinforced by the institution's own inaction." He paused. "Today will prove that Kendrick was set up." Kendrick took the stand first. He recounted the day of the accusation, the moment Crane had humiliated him in front of the entire lecture hall. The group chat leaks, the metadata from the exam files. His voice didn't tremble. He no longer needed to plead. He was stating facts. Next came Harper. She presented the grade disparity data. 8 years of Crane's classes showing consistent gaps aligned with race and legacy. She zoomed in on bonus curve patterns, showed side-by-side comparisons of exam structures, and read anonymous comments from former students who had dropped out after being academically cornered. Then Mallory stepped up. She plugged in the flash drive and opened the folder labeled KML Talt, mid, side by side with the standard version. She highlighted the subtle differences in formatting, phrasing, and difficulty. Clear evidence Kendrick had been handed an alternate, more difficult exam, built to undermine. Then came the metadata tag. She paused, letting the screen zoom in for all to see. "Use this one for him." The room fell silent. The board members scribbled furiously. Crane leaned slightly forward, eyes narrowed but lips pressed tight. His lawyer remained stoic, whispering occasionally but offering no defense yet. They were waiting for what? No one could tell. Then Crane was invited to speak. He rose slowly, adjusted his blazer, and approached the microphone. "There was no conspiracy," he said plainly. "There was no manipulation. There was academic observation. Mr. Malone is a gifted student, but gifts without grounding become dangerous." He completed the exam suspiciously fast, with answers matching patterns from archived restricted materials. "I acted according to my responsibility to ensure fairness." He turned slightly toward the board. "If anything," he continued, "this entire storm illustrates a cultural obsession with victimhood. Mr. Malone is not underprivileged. He's not oppressed. He's praised, overpraised. The idea that rigor is racism is insulting to every student who earns their place." Gasps rang across the overflow rooms. Harper's hands clenched. Mallory's jaw dropped. Kendrick said nothing. His silence said more. Crane's lawyer stepped in next, arguing that the metadata could have been altered, the group chats fabricated, the documents circumstantial. The system, they claimed, was flawed, but not intentionally discriminatory. "At worst, this is a case of poor optics," the lawyer said, "not misconduct." Then Jordan rose again. His voice was lower this time. Slower. Calculated. "May I present one final piece of evidence?" The board nodded. Jordan tapped his laptop and cued a video file to the main screen. The title read, "Naomi Liang Interview." Kendrick's chest tightened. The entire room shifted. The video opened in a dimly lit space. Naomi's face partially obscured, her voice soft but clear. "My name is Naomi Liang. I was a student at Behringer until 2021. I was targeted by Professor Crane for being disruptive in class, not because I yelled, not because I cheated, but because I asked questions that challenged his methods. She took a breath. He docked my grades, removed me from peer projects. When I pushed back, he told me I lacked the instinct real mathematicians have. I compiled data, filed complaints. Nothing happened. The chair told me it would damage my academic future to pursue it. She held up a flash drive. This contains audio of meetings, altered grades, peer comparisons, and emails from Crane calling students like me statistical outliers worth pruning. I gave this to someone I trusted, Luis Garza. I left because I was scared, but now I see, leaving only let them keep doing it. The screen faded to black. The room sat in stunned silence. Crane's face for the first time broke. His lip twitched. His eyes darted to the legal lep beside him. A whisper. A visible shift. Panic was no longer subtle. The compliance officer cleared his throat again. Do you have any response, Professor Crane? But Crane remained seated. The lawyer leaned in. No further comment. Jordan stepped forward. Then we rest our case. Just as the board prepared to adjourn for deliberation, another student in the back, tall, nervous, holding a folder, stood up and said shakily, I have something to add. I was in Crane's class too, and I was bribed to lie. The student's voice still echoed through the room when the door at the back creaked open. A figure stepped in. Tall, older, wearing the muted uniform of university staff. The moment he entered, the boardroom stiffened. Even Crane's lawyer looked uncertain. The man approached the front without introduction, clutching a manila envelope, his hands visibly shaking. He cleared his throat. My name is Stanley Reeves. I work in donor communications. I didn't know where else to go. I watched this entire hearing, and when I saw the video of Naomi, I couldn't stay silent anymore. He placed the envelope on the table. This contains a printed email, he said. One that Professor Crane sent last semester to a donor named Lawrence Whitby, an alum who funds our faculty excellence grant. It wasn't supposed to be public, but I saw it. I archived it, and I made a copy. He looked directly at Kendrick, because it mentioned you. The board chair raised a hand. Mr. Reeves, this is highly irregular. Reeves interrupted, voice stronger now. So was giving a professor unchecked power to sabotage students for 8 years. A tense pause. The chair reluctantly nodded for Jordan Wells to open the envelope. Jordan pulled out the paper and began reading aloud. Lawrence, thanks for your continued support. As always, we're working to preserve the intellectual culture here. Unfortunately, the administration's push for representational equity has saddled us with students who are not up to par. I don't waste my time nurturing diversity hires. I focus on brilliance, not balance. The air was sucked out of the room. Even Crane's lawyer blanched. Gasps erupted from the students watching the live stream. The board chair dropped her pen. One faculty member visibly recoiled. For the first time, Crane's composure cracked. Not in anger, but in fear. His face flushed, his jaw twitching violently. There was no hiding from this. No argument about context. No academic shield. He had written it, and now the entire world had read it. Outside the building, a roar began to rise. Students who had been watching the hearing from the quad began chanting, louder, unified, as if something had finally snapped. Not brilliance, just bias. Not excellence, just exclusion. Inside, the board chair slammed the gavel and called an immediate recess. Crane stood slowly, as if underwater. His lawyer leaned in, whispering furiously. But Crane didn't move. His hands hung limp at his sides, the illusion of superiority now visibly shattered. Kendrick sat back, breath slow, eyes steady. He had imagined justice looking like a ruling, or a statement, or a number on paper. He never imagined it would come in the form of a single line. I don't waste my time nurturing diversity hires. And yet it said more than all the data combined. Outside, Harper raced up the steps toward the doors, holding her phone high. It's confirmed, she said breathlessly. 3 independent tech forensics just authenticated the email. It's real. Crane's defenders are deleting their statements. Everyone's flipping. Mallory's face lit up with a mix of disbelief and relief. They're turning on him. Harper nodded. Faculty committee members, donors, even the math department alumni page took his name off the banner. Inside the hearing room, the board members had separated into a huddle. Their whispers carried tension, but their expressions were no longer confused. They were cornered. Then, one by one, Crane's allies began to walk out. The assistant dean of academics left first, avoiding eye contact. A faculty liaison followed, her face pale. But it was Dr. Andrew Bellamy, Crane's longtime colleague and former co-author, who paused before exiting. He walked past Kendrick slowly, pausing just long enough to whisper, "I should have spoken up years ago." Then he slipped a thin folder onto Kendrick's desk. "There's more," he said, "but you'll want to read it in private." The door clicked shut behind Dr. Bellamy. The room felt hollow, as though the walls themselves were stepping back, giving Kendrick space, but also exposing him. The thin folder lay on the polished table like a quiet bomb waiting to go off. Kendrick opened it slowly. Inside were dozens of printed emails, their headers raw with dates, exchanges, and coded language. The first one bore Crane's name. The rest included signatures of various faculty, department heads, and even a few deans. The tone was chillingly consistent. Speak of standards, legacy preservation, maintaining elitism, and curating academic lineage. One email, time-stamped 2 years before Kendrick's scandal began, read, "We must ensure that scholarship recipients do not overlap with future equity cohorts. The ratio must stay below threshold. The curve must protect tradition." Another note, marked urgent, instructed a junior professor, "If any minority student stands out too early, assign them alternate exam versions. Keep them in line." Shock settled deep in Kendrick's bones, as he realized the conspiracy wasn't just about one professor or one department. It was structural, nestled in official correspondence, intentionally hidden from public view. He looked up. Harper and Mallory sat across from him, their faces pale, but their eyes bright with adrenaline. Kendrick felt the pattern meet the moment. He nodded. So this wasn't just Crane anymore, he murmured. This was the system making sure it never got caught. Harper clicked on an email flagged confidential, do not forward. The subject, Legacy Assurance Memo. The message described how certain students, mostly from legacy families or long-standing donor relatives, would receive curve allowances or modified grading rubrics, ensuring their GPAs remained artificially inflated. The final line said, "This ensures our funding remains stable." Mallory exhaled. They admit it themselves. Kendrick ran a hand over his face, his heart pounding. The folder held more than resentment. It held admission, and now, armed with it, he couldn't be silenced. That's when the external door opened again. 2 security officers entered, and the lead officer held a small envelope. They addressed Crane's lawyer first. "Sir, you're being asked to relinquish all electronic devices for review." Crane's lawyer looked puzzled, then anger flared in his eyes. He glanced at Crane, but Crane just stared ahead, expression blank. The officer turned toward Kendrick. "Mr. Malone, you need to come with us to retrieve some items you may have inadvertently taken as part of this hearing." Kendrick's stomach dropped. His mind raced. Was this a chase? A trap? But he stood slowly, composed, the folder pressed against his chest. "Why?" he asked, voice calm. Officer's eyes shifted, uncomfortable. "Standard procedure," he said. "Containment for investigation purposes." The room erupted. Harper stood, shouting, "You can't detain him. We're under public scrutiny." Students watching via live stream gasped in unison. Some began typing outrage into chat windows. The board members froze. Even Crane's lawyer looked shocked, but the officer nodded curtly. "I'm sorry, miss. Protocol." Kendrick didn't move. He looked at the board chair, at Crane, at the cameras. Then he said quietly, loud enough for the live mic to pick up, "If you think I'm a threat, look in the mirror." He set the folder on the table. "I'm handing over my phone. But these files stay where they are. You all heard them, saw them." He stepped forward, hand raised, phone in hand. The students watching erupted in the chamber, and online. Cheers, curses, applause, shock. The board chair banged the gavel, trying to restore order. Crane's face flushed, eyes wide with panic. The door closed behind the officers, sealing Kendrick in. Silence crashed in. Papers rustled. Security hovered near the exits. The live stream wavered for a second, before returning. And then unexpectedly, someone else stood. A junior professor whose name had appeared in the email notes earlier. A young woman, Asian, quiet but firm. She cleared her throat. "I was told to prepare alternate exams," she said. "I complied. I handed them to Crane. I went along with it. But I'm done hiding." Her confession spread across the room in a low roar. The faculty members sat frozen, their faces drained. The junior professor's voice shook, but she held the mic steady. As far as I know, she continued, I never knew their names, just file codes. But now I see what they meant, and I regret it. The compliance officer looked like he'd swallowed ice. Crane's lawyer opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Harper leaned toward Kendrick. You have enough now, she said quietly. Enough to bring down the whole house. He picked up the folder. His eyes met Crane's across the table. No hate. Not yet. Just tired vindication. As the hearing room erupted into murmurs, the live stream chat flooded with a single repeated message, typed over and over. Where is Naomi Lian? The camera cut to static. Then the broadcast abruptly ended, and outside in the shadowed courtyard, a lone figure pressed a small note into Kendrick's hand, then disappeared into the night. On that note, scrawled in shaky script, were 2 words, find her. The folder Dr. Bellamy had left on the desk felt heavier now than when Kendrick first touched it. It was no longer just paper bound by brittle stapled edges. It was a tombstone for decades of silence. Back in Kendrick's dorm, he, Harper, and Mallory spread the pages across the small table under the dim lamp. Every letter, memo, note, and report lay exposed, each a silent scream from the past that had been ignored. The first envelope they opened was labeled Faculty Concern, Confidential. Inside was a typed letter dated 2017, signed by 2 tenured professors in the mathematics department. The title read, Report on Patterns of Unjust Grading and Hostile Environment for Minority Students. Their stomachs turned as they read. The letter described a student, R.M., a black woman, top of her class, who had approached Crane after receiving a B- on a final exam. According to the letter, she was told in front of peers that girls from her background often lacked the logical rigor needed for upper-level work. Her attempts to appeal were dismissed. The note said she subsequently dropped out, too demoralized, too exhausted by the implicit message. She was not wanted. The professors had requested an internal review, noting that multiple minority students had anonymously reported similar mistreatment, lost assignments, unexplained score reductions, inconsistent feedback. Their plea ended with a stark line. This behavior must be corrected before more promising students vanish. Kendrick's throat tightened. Harper laid a hand on his shoulder, but she didn't speak. The weight of history pressed down on them. The letter was untouched. No follow-up. No committee formed. No record acknowledging its existence. It had been shelved, like students, like voices, into quiet oblivion. They moved to the next file, departmental meeting minutes from 20. The header glared. Mathematics Depth Diversity Outcomes, Status Review. In the margins, handwritten by a junior faculty member, was a comment, we cannot afford public scrutiny on how curves are assigned. Suggest we monitor non-traditional backgrounds more strictly. Underlined twice, it wasn't code, it was admission. Racism cloaked in institutional language, and it was presented as policy. Mallory pulled out a smaller envelope marked simply data logs. Inside were spreadsheets spanning 8 years, similar to the one they had already released, but these contained more: attendance patterns, participation scores, TA feedback comments, archival exam version, and in small boxes beside certain students' names, the same ALT exam codes they had found already, but now next to names later listed in scholarship denial letters or forced withdrawals. The pattern was brutal, systematic. This was not a mistake, it was a design. Harper whispered, they didn't want to graduate underrepresented students. Her voice cracked like a shard. As they continued flipping through documents, Kendrick found one memo dated 2020, addressed to the Dean of Student Affairs. It described a student, an Asian male, who had emailed complaining about discriminatory feedback. The memo dismissed the complaint as grade dissatisfaction, stating that the student's academic promise was not consistent with our standards of mathematical maturity. The same memo concluded, we advise tracking future coursework performance under close supervision. The polite language camouflaged the intent: control, suppression, erasure. Kendrick closed his eyes. For the first time, the barrage of doubts, slights, questions, every time he had wondered if he was only imagining bias, snapped into clarity. It wasn't paranoid suspicion. It was historical evidence. This was how the institution maintained its image. One student's success erased, another's progress derailed, while names, records, fines, whispers piled up, hidden in drawers, banished to archives, buried under institutional bureaucracy. Mallory placed her hand over the data logs. We have to put it all out, she said, voice barely louder than a breath. Not just the exam file. Not just the spreadsheet. Everything. Let the world see what they hid. Harper nodded slowly, brows drawn. Full release. We'll package it. Send to national media advocacy groups, legal watchdogs. Once out, it can't just be swept under the rug again. Kendrick rose from his chair. The exhaustion of weeks, months of stress weighed on him. But he stood straighter than before. If they go after us, we go back 5 steps further. Let them fight the truth. Because there's enough of it here to bury this entire legacy. They began organizing the documents. Emails, memoranda, spreadsheets, meeting minutes. Everything labeled, dated, cross-referenced. The smell of old paper, mixed with the cold lamplight. The folder on the desk no longer felt heavy. It felt righteous. But before they could begin uploading, the dorm room door slammed open. Their heads snapped up. Standing in the doorway was a well-dressed lawyer. Early 50s, sharp suit, stern face. Behind him, 2 campus security officers. Harper's eyes went wide. Who? The lawyer stepped forward, clearing his throat. Miss Jennings, Mr. Malone, Miss Finch. I'm representing the university. You are hereby served with a notice of defamation and a cease and desist order, effective immediately. Any dissemination of the documents in your possession will be considered unlawful. If you proceed, the institution will pursue all legal remedies available, including injunctions, criminal damage claims, and pursuit of personal liability. His voice was cold, controlled, but underneath was steel. Mallory stood. Anger and fear mingled on her face. You can't scare us into erasing the truth. The lawyer flicked through his thickness of legal pads as if fingering his power. I suggest you reconsider. This is your only warning. Kendrick closed the folder softly, gaze steady. Thank you for the notice. We'll be waiting. As the lawyer turned to leave, the security officers followed. The door shut behind them. The room was silent, but alive. A decision hung in the air. Harper exhaled. They just escalated. Kendrick picked up the top sheet of the faculty concern letter, the one written in 2017. He held it like a badge. Then we release. Tonight. Mallory swallowed, nodding. Let's finish. But before they could stand, Harper's phone buzzed. She glanced down, eyes widening. Jordan Wells, she murmured. Our lawyer. Kendrick and Mallory froze. Harper's fingers shook as she tapped the screen. He says, he's reviewing a file. Says it's heavy. Says it confirms everything we've found. Kendrick leaned forward. Then we release. Mallory's nod was fierce. We release. They sat down again, turning on the laptop, fingers hovering over upload. The lamp cast long shadows across their determined faces, tired, resolute, irrevocably changed. Kendrick's fingers hovered over the upload key, as silence tightened around them, like a drawstring. Every screen in the room glowed faintly, the university-issued laptop, Harper's backup phone, and Mallory's encrypted drive, each prepped with organized folders, labeled suppressed faculty complaints, disparity charts, memo archives, alternate exam schemes, and NAO-IME files. Every file was backed up in 3 places, each document time-stamped and metadata verified. They had built a digital fortress of truth, one Crane's legacy couldn't crawl over. The legal warning still sat on the table, as real and threatening as a gun left in the middle of a peace march. But Kendrick didn't flinch. He looked over at Harper. Her eyes were locked on the screen, hands trembling, but her resolve was forged in fire now. Mallory leaned closer, whispering, Once we post, we can't undo it. Kendrick replied, voice low, steady. They already tried to erase us. We're just unerasing the others. The first upload began, a sweeping PDF compilation titled Pattern of Prejudice: 8 Years of Academic Misconduct in Plain Sight. It was followed by redacted emails, spreadsheets with color-coded inequities, quotes from former students and anonymous faculty. Harper moved quickly, formatting social media posts, each one paired with selected evidence and a short, chilling caption. Mallory created a master tweet thread. Thrill, what our university buried, and why we can't stay silent anymore. Uncover Behringer. The posts went live at midnight. By 12:03, the first post had 1,200 retweets. By 12:06, Kendrick's name was trending nationally. Again. This time, not with doubt, but with fire. By 12:10, the official university subreddit was flooded with shocked reactions. Screenshots of Crane's racist email circulated next to footage of his previous speeches on educational excellence. Students from past years began commenting under aliases, confirming what they'd seen or suffered, but had been too afraid to name. A former grad student posted, "Crane marked me down 30% for weak mathematical instinct. I was on scholarship. After that semester, I wasn't." Another added, "He told me that accents were a learning disadvantage. I was born in Queens. My only accent was black." The momentum became unstoppable. Within 24 minutes, the hashtag #InExposeCrane overtook Kendrick's name. Then, at 12:15 a.m., the defamation lawsuit officially dropped, filed electronically, served to all 3 students via email. The subject line was sterile, but the impact was explosive. Barringer v. Malone. Jennings Finch. Civil defamation and data misappropriation. The claim demanded immediate takedown of all published documents, damages exceeding $500,000, and a formal retraction. Attached was a temporary restraining order request. Kendrick read it twice, then deleted the email. He turned to Harper and Mallory. "You ready?" Harper smirked. "Born ready." Mallory replied, "They forgot the internet doesn't delete truth." By 12:25, independent civil rights lawyers had publicly offered to represent the trio pro bono. By 12:32, CNN had requested an interview. By 12:35, the university's main site crashed under traffic spikes. And by 12:45, screenshots of the legal threat blacked out names, but visible titles began circulating with captions like, "When justice becomes defamation, what does that say?" Crane had 8 years. They had 8 days. Look what truth can do. Students at Barringer began gathering again outside the main academic building, chanting beneath windows now shuttered with embarrassment. The chants rang louder this time, less as protest, more as declaration. Kendrick spoke. "You listen." Inside the dorm, Kendrick leaned back in his chair, exhausted but exhaling something that almost resembled peace. Mallory rested her head on the table. Harper refreshed the thread again. 20,000 shares and climbing. And then Harper's phone buzzed again. The screen read, "University President, live press conference, 9 a.m. tomorrow." She turned it toward Kendrick. He met her eyes. "They're scrambling." She nodded slowly. "They're going to try damage control." But Kendrick knew this wasn't damage control. This was war. And tomorrow they'd either bury the truth or burn trying. As the screen dimmed and Harper set down her phone, Mallory's inbox pinged. A new message had arrived. No subject line. No sender ID. Just a single sentence. "You didn't find all of Naomi's file." The courthouse didn't look like a battlefield. It had white stone walls, tall windows, polished metal detectors, and the dull scent of fresh carpet and recycled air. But for Kendrick, Harper, and Mallory, it might as well have been the front line of a war they never asked to fight. They entered through the side entrance, escorted by their legal team, 4 attorneys, all from different firms, united by one mission: to bring light to what Barringer University had worked tirelessly to bury. Crane had filed the lawsuit weeks prior, accusing them of defamation, data theft, and malicious slander. But once the university's inner documents went viral, the court had fast-tracked the hearing under the state's whistleblower protection clause. What was supposed to be a quiet disciplinary process had become a full-blown civil trial, with national reporters waiting outside and student protesters gathered across the street. Inside the courtroom, the judge presiding was Elena Braxton, known for her sharp wit, intolerance for grandstanding, and reputation for cutting through institutional fog like a blade. As she entered, the murmur in the room fell to a hush. The trial opened with Crane's lead attorney presenting his argument with carefully measured outrage. He accused Kendrick and the others of unlawfully obtaining private university communications, misrepresenting them to the public, and causing irreparable damage to the reputation of a respected academic institution. Harper's lawyer, Jordan Wells, stood in response. Calm, clear. "What my clients exposed was not defamation. It was documentation," he said. "Not slander, but structure. And the plaintiff knows it." The first piece of evidence entered into court: the alternate exams file. Mallory took the stand first. She described finding the folder on the TA's shared drive. She explained how Kendrick's version of the midterm differed in difficulty, structure, and layout. Wells displayed both exams on a large screen. Even a layperson could see it. Kendrick's exam had multiple multi-step proofs, trick logic traps, and no calculator-friendly options. The standard version given to the rest of the class was basic by comparison. When Crane's lawyer tried to suggest the discrepancy was an error, Mallory replied coolly, "Then why did the file have a label? Use this one for him." The courtroom stirred. Then Harper took the stand. She recounted the process of authenticating the emails and grade distribution files. Her composure didn't waver, even when opposing counsel attempted to corner her. "You're not a data analyst, are you?" "No," she said plainly. "But 3 credentialed ones signed off on this dataset. Would you like their numbers?" The judge smiled faintly behind her glasses. Kendrick sat quietly at the defense table, watching as every part of their months-long effort unfolded in public. Backed now by law, by process, by justice, but the real test came when he stood to testify. He spoke about the initial accusation, about the whispers, the humiliation, the loss of friends, his academic record, which once stood untouchable, now marred by rumor and policy. Then he spoke about Naomi Leung, about the flash drive, about Luis, and the unseen students who were never granted a voice. The prosecution tried to shake him. They asked if he felt targeted, simply because he was struggling academically. They cited his drop in confidence, his emotional stress, his vendetta. But Kendrick didn't flinch. "I wasn't struggling. I was erased," he said. "They wanted people like me to doubt ourselves until we disappeared. But I stayed." The turning point came when Judge Braxton requested all parties pause. She leaned forward. "I've reviewed the emails, the files, the deposition transcripts. What concerns me most is not the individual conduct of Professor Crane, but the systemic rote that enabled it. If what I'm seeing holds under further scrutiny, this institution may be complicit in far more than bias." A ripple of tension shot across the courtroom. Crane shifted in his seat, jaw clenched, and then it happened. Crane's own attorney stood and asked for a recess. The judge nodded. 5 minutes later, he returned alone. "Your Honor," the lawyer said, avoiding Crane's eyes, "I'm withdrawing from representation." Gasps erupted. Crane turned sharply, eyes wide. "You can't do that."
I can, and I must.
"I've just received additional information that compromises my ability to defend him in good faith." Judge Braxton turned her steely eyes toward Crane. "Mr. Crane, unless new counsel is appointed immediately, this trial will proceed without a defense." Crane stared at the floor. The illusion was fracturing. Fast. A courtroom losing its defense attorney was almost unheard of, and yet Crane sat frozen, staring at the wooden grain of the table as if trying to anchor himself to a past that no longer existed. The cameras outside caught the whispers. The reporters scribbled faster, and Judge Braxton waited, unblinking.
"Mr. Crane," she said, "if you wish to replace counsel, say so now."
Crane's voice emerged thin, brittle. I need time." "You may have 10 minutes, she replied. "After that, we continue." 10 minutes passed. Crane returned with no one. No new lawyer. No advisor. Not even a whisper from the university's legal office. They had abandoned him in the most strategic moment. A silent admission of guilt from those who had once shielded him. "Very well," Judge Braxton said. "We proceed." The prosecution, once confident, was now stripped of structure. Their remaining associate stammered through fragments of argument, trying desperately to reframe Crane as a misunderstood academic, a victim of misinterpretation, a defender of excellence. Judge Braxton cut him off. "Excellence without equality is not excellence," she said. "It is exclusion." Then she invited Jordan Wells to present the final evidence. Jordan stood, opened a binder, and pulled out a document stamped with the university seal. "Your Honor, this is a deposition from a current administrator who requested anonymity. They have confirmed the existence of undocumented grading committees, groups formed unofficially for the purpose of determining which students received bonus curves, and which received disciplinary scrutiny." The judge skimmed it. "This suggests coordination beyond Professor Crane." "It does," Jordan said, "and it includes direct references to Mr. Crane's recommendations. Recommendations rooted in racial bias." Crane's face tightened, but he said nothing. His silence no longer looked dignified. It looked defeated. Jordan continued. "We also submit evidence of doctored participation scores, punitive alternate exams, and internal messages referencing minority students as statistical interruptions. Every one of these documents was verified by external auditors. Nothing has been altered." The courtroom fell into a silence that felt almost sacred, the kind that forms when truth finally undeniable takes its place. Judge Braxton folded her hands. "Mr. Crane, do you wish to respond?" Crane rose slowly. His voice cracked. I did what I believed was necessary to preserve standards. By destroying futures? Jordan asked. Crane glared. By preventing mediocrity from masquerading as achievement. That sentence reverberated. Even the air recoiled from it. Judge Braxton's expression hardened. Sit down, Mr. Crane. He did. What followed was slow, methodical, irreversible. The judge addressed the room, and the live stream audience beyond it, with measured conviction. This court finds that the defendants, Kendrick Malone, Harper Jennings, and Mallory Finch, acted within the scope of whistleblower protection. Their disclosures were grounded in truth, supported by documentation, and motivated by the pursuit of justice, not defamation. A ripple of breath swept through the room. She continued, voice steady. This court also finds that the plaintiff, Professor Elliot Crane, engaged in a gross abuse of academic power, driven by racial bias, protected by systemic negligence. His actions caused measurable harm to students under his instruction, and violated both ethical codes and state anti-discrimination laws. Gasps erupted, not from surprise but from relief. Crane collapsed back into his chair, hands trembling. Judge Braxton closed her ruling with a final, resounding blow. The court rules in favor of Kendrick Malone. Professor Crane's claims are dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, this court recommends an immediate state review of Barringer University's academic integrity systems. The gavel sounded like thunder. The room erupted. Students shouted. Reporters sprinted out to broadcast headlines. A crowd outside the courthouse let out a cheer so loud it rattled the windows. Protest signs rose into the air, filling the plaza like a forest of fists reclaiming sunlight. Kendrick stood still, breath shaky, eyes burning. Not from pain, from release, from recognition. Harper threw her arms around him. Mallory grabbed his sleeve, crying but smiling. It's over, she whispered. But Kendrick shook his head gently. No, it's starting. Outside, the media swarmed. Cameras lifted, microphones crowded. Flashbulbs painted white light across Kendrick's face. Students chanting his name grew louder. Some wept. Some shouted for the university president to resign. Harper took Kendrick's hand, pulling him into the center of the crowd. For the first time, he didn't feel exposed. He felt seen, heard, and unafraid. But then Harper's phone buzzed. A campus-wide alert. Mandatory university announcement. Live press conference tomorrow. 9. Then another message flashed. President Hawthorne to address Malone case, and systemic review. Livestream required for all students. Kendrick exhaled slowly. The university president had been publicly silent for months. Now, forced by the weight of truth, she would be facing the world. Mallory leaned in. Do you think she's stepping down? Harper frowned. Or doubling down. Kendrick looked back at the courthouse. At the door Crane had walked through moments earlier. No longer the untouchable figure he once was. This isn't an apology, Kendrick said. It's a strategy. Harper nodded. Then we need one too. As Kendrick stepped into the car waiting to take them home, his phone vibrated with an unknown number. A message appeared. The president isn't your real problem. Meet me after the conference. I have Naomi's final file. The sender's name chilled him. Truth bomb 40. The auditorium lights dimmed low. The hush in the crowd thick as cotton. Outside, news vans clustered behind barricades, their cameras swiveling toward the stage where the searchlights cut through dusk. Students, alumni, media, nearly 1,000 faces sat packed in rows, every eye fixed on the podium draped in the university banner of Barringer University, now stained by scandal and promise. Kendrick Malone stood backstage, the hush echoing louder than any chant. His suit jacket felt heavy with history, but his heart was lighter than it had been in months. He glanced at Harper Jennings and Mallory Finch, standing beside him. Their eyes were bright but wary. They'd walked the last miles with him. But what came next wasn't just closure, it was rebirth. When the university president, Marisol Hawthorne, walked onto the stage, the room quieted further. The flash of cameras stuttered. The hush settled like dust before rain. Her face, calm but firm, bore the weight of months of silence. Good evening, she began, voice steady. Today is not just about one student, not just about one professor. It is about every unheard voice, every erased record, every future we risked losing while we pretended bias didn't exist. Her gaze shifted slightly, locking on Kendrick. Mr. Kendrick Malone. We were wrong. Gasps broke across the auditorium. Kendrick's breath caught. He felt the world tilt. She continued. Effective immediately, Barringer University will restore Mr. Malone's full scholarship, lift all academic probation, and reinstate his course list with full honors. In addition, the mathematics department will undergo a complete independent racial equity audit, to be completed within 6 months. The results will be published publicly. No secrecy, no spin. The murmurs swelled. Approval, surprise, relief. But then as she reached deeper inside a folder on the podium, the room leaned forward again. I also offer this, she said, voice soft but resolute. On behalf of the university, I apologize. Not just in words, but in action. To Kendrick, to every student who was silenced, to every parent who believed in fairness, and to the very ideals of education we claim to honor. Behind her, a large screen flickered to life. It played a short montage. Students of color studying late nights, erased test papers, anonymous letters, name after name, face after face. Then it faded. A single line remained. Education is not privilege. It is right. Silence filled the air for a heartbeat. Then the auditorium stood. A roar, not of anger but of vindication. Tears glistened on cheeks. Phones recorded. Cameras flashed. The president's apology, once unthinkable, now echoed in every corridor, every dorm room, every heart that had believed in justice. Kendrick felt something shift inside him. A tension released, a knot unraveling. He looked at Harper and Mallory, their smiles trembling. Mallory's voice was soft but fierce. You did this. Harper nodded, eyes wet. We did. But Kendrick shook his head. We were never doing it for that. His voice firm, quiet. We did it for everyone who couldn't. The next morning, the campus was unrecognizable. News trucks lined the main drive. Posters of Kendrick's name hung beside justice slogans. Students crowded bulletin boards with new flyers. Support the equity movement. Never silent again. A chain reaction had begun the night before, not just inside the walls of power, but outside, where youth, anger, hope, and phone cameras converged. Inside the math department, notices went up. Tenure revoked effective immediately. The name above it, Elliot Crane. Alongside, a statement listed the findings of the independent audit: manipulated exams, systematic racial bias, targeted suppression of minority students, and institutional neglect. His titles revoked. His standing erased. The legacy of fear dismantled in one morning. Still, what stunned the campus most was not just Crane's removal, but the offer extended to Kendrick. In a public letter read by the chair of a newly formed oversight committee, Kendrick was offered a full research assistantship, priority access to graduate-level seminars, and a stipend for a year-long fellowship studying equity and STEM education. The letter ended. Barringer commits to rebuilding through transparency, not tradition. The crowd in the lecture hall clapped, not with condescension or pity, but with respect, not just for Kendrick, but for what he now symbolized: truth, resistance, and change. Kendrick stepped to the front, microphone in hand. The room was packed, not a seat empty. Reporters framed him. Students leaned forward. Harper and Mallory stood at his side. He drew a breath, weight of months behind it. This is not about me, he said, voice steady. It's about all of us. It's about every student who was told they didn't belong because of their name, their background, the color of their skin. This scholarship isn't just money, it's validation. But the real validation is this moment, when the system admits it was wrong, when the institution decides not to erase us anymore, but to lift us up. A wave of applause rolled through the hall. He paused, then added quietly, and for those still too afraid to speak, you don't have to carry your silence alone. Backstage after the speech, reporters swarmed him. But the first person who reached him was a freshman, a slim black girl, wearing the university's colors, eyes wide with emotion. She stepped forward, voice trembling, as she held out her phone. On the screen was a text: just got accepted, first in my family. She looked at Kendrick. I'm here because of what you did. His chest tightened. Not from triumph, from responsibility. He nodded, words catching in his throat. Then I keep fighting. For you. For all of you. Their night wasn't over. Later, in a small press area, the president took the stage again. Cameras flashed, microphones hovered. Students leaned forward. She spoke. We will institute mandatory bias training for all faculty. We will establish an anonymous reporting system. We will appoint third-party observers in all large lecture courses. We will audit and reevaluate every grade from 2015 onward for potential bias. And we promise transparency, every result made public. Her voice was firm, not defensive, determined. Behind her, the crowd listened. The world watched. As the press conference ended and people began to disperse, Harper, Mallory and Kendrick stepped out into the night air. The campus seemed different now, quieter but alive, worn by stress but cleansed by truth. Kendrick exhaled, watching streetlights glow in rhythm with his heartbeat. Mallory said, "Tomorrow they rebuild." Harper added, "But tonight we rest, for now." Kendrick nodded, but before they turned, a lone student, a freshman, hood pulled close, approached softly, fear in her eyes, hope on her lips. She looked at Kendrick and whispered, "I'm here because of what you did." Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. In it was everything: gratitude, pain, expectation, a living testament to the fact that change doesn't erase scars. It gives hope to heal them. As she turned, Kendrick's eyes followed her, not with triumph, but with purpose. The fight wasn't over. It had evolved, and now it belonged to more than him. Behind him, a folder fell from someone's hand into the dim hallway, papers spilling out. Harper reached down to pick them up. On the top sheet, bold letters read, "Class Year Reevaluation Report. Pending." As Harper looked up, her eyes met Kendrick's. Neither spoke. They didn't have to. The fight was far from over. If you believe stories like Kendrick's deserve to be heard, type yes in the comments. Have you ever seen someone punished just for speaking the truth? Subscribe to join a community that refuses to stay silent. Because until every voice is safe, none of us are truly free.